Elizabeth, welcome to Straight Up. We are overjoyed to have you here. We literally can't stop smiling. We're so happy.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here.
You're
Thank you for having
literally
me.
our podcasting idol.
Yes.
So
Stop.
we're
We were
happy
just
to
saying
have
off
her.
air, this has been a dream many a years in the making for us.
Oh, that means so much to me, honestly. And when I listen to your podcast and I hear these two smart, funny, intelligent women dissecting culture, to think that you even know who I am, let alone call
my
me your
goodness.
podcasting idol, means the world to me.
I
So
think we're
thank
both
you.
blushing.
I know. Thank you. So we're huge fans of How to Fail, long-time listeners, and we wanted to kick off today with a similar kind of starting point in that you always ask your guests for 3 failures.
Yes.
We wanted to ask you for your 3 cultural recommendations, which you've been having a think about before.
Yes.
So we've got film, TV, and book. Which one would you like to start with?
Let's start with TV because I've picked Adolescence
Yeah.
and there's so much cultural conversation around it that I just thought I'd add my 2 pence worth.
Yeah.
Please do.
So I chose Adolescence because I watched it recently so I can remember the plot, which is not always the case. But also because I interviewed Erin Doherty on How to Fail, and I've been obsessed with her as an actor for a while since she starred in a BBC series called Chloe, which
I
Yes.
loved that. No
Hardly
one else
anyone's
watched
seen
it.
it.
Oh my God, it was so good.
it was so good,
about,
wasn't it?
Yes, about her essentially taking someone's identity.
Yes, and parasocial relationships. And I remember watching that show, and I'd never come across Erin Doherty before because I don't watch The Crown.
No, me
So
neither.
sue me.
Yeah.
Ellie.
God.
What is
Are
that?
we the same person?
Yeah, I think we are.
So it's the first time I'd seen her act, and there's a specific bit in Chloe where suddenly she changes her accent and changes her character, and I was like, oh, wow, she is so talented. So I just interviewed her for How to Fail about a different program called 1,000 Blows, and then Adolescence came up on my kind of recommended list on Netflix, and I was like, oh, it's Erin again, and it's Stephen Graham, who obviously I also think is an extraordinary talent and had been following his career for years. I thought he was brilliant in Line of Duty, brilliant in Boiling Point. He just brings this like raw presence to everything he does. And I started watching it without knowing that much about it. And obviously it blew me away for all of the reasons that everyone's been discussing. The storyline about a young boy who is arrested for murdering a female classmate, and then the whole did he do it, didn't he? And the whole sort of shift between the audience perception of his innocence because he's so young, and Owen Cooper delivers this extraordinarily moving performance, but then your perspective shifts and you understand that all is not as it seems. And it obviously tackles issues around incel culture and how much time teenagers spend on their mobile phones and all of that. But the reason I love it, aside from all of those things, the acting is brilliant. It's the single take of it all. So for anyone who doesn't know, each episode is filmed in a single take, which is so extraordinary when you think about it. And I think the reason I love it so much is because it means that you get this sort of extreme naturalism to it and sense of dramatic tension that you get with the best plays, but it's somehow even better than that because you get so many camera angles. And so the technical mastery of it, aside from the actual performances, and I was completely riveted by it. And then I went and did an internet deep dive, as I think everyone else did. And I was like, how many takes did they do?
Yeah.
And then read that they did 2 takes every day and they had 5 days filming for each episode. And the fascinating thing was, for the first episode, which is a very complicated one to film if you watch it, it was the second take that they chose as the final episode.
And it was also Erin's episode was the first one they filmed.
Was it?
Yeah, which is extraordinary when you
Yeah.
think Owen Cooper hadn't acted before. This was his first role, and he delivered that episode at the beginning of the
I
shoot.
did not know
And,
that.
and you know the yawn that he
Yes.
has was just by accident, and they just kept it in.
And then Erin, because she's the phenomenal talent that she is able to improvise from that so brilliantly.
Yes, because she's like, am I boring you?
yeah,
Oh, so good.
it was riveting. And I've been analysing why I was so riveted by it and why the single take spoke to me so deeply. And I think it's because I'm a huge reality TV fan.
Yes.
And I'm a huge fan of naturalism. And it's actually why I sometimes don't like theatre, because I find it so stagey, quite literally. And this, for me, was the perfect combination of a sort of vernacular of reality TV, but elevated to dramatic art. And it was just like the perfect mixture for me.
Also, I think the fact that Adolescence has not only been the biggest British show on Netflix of all time, breaking all kind of streaming records, it's also now officially going to be shown in schools.
Yes.
That is testament to the power of art. And while obviously
Yes.
we could have a whole conversation about the things that like the government and other social bodies should be doing to tackle this very real issue of the kind of incel culture, the manosphere, violence against women and girls, the fact that a Netflix show has created more conversation than any other cultural moment is indicative of the power of art to create real social and cultural change.
Preach. Exactly that. And at a time when arts funding is being cut and cut and cut, something like Adolescence just shows how we should be investing in pieces like this, because the conversation around it has been astonishing and ongoing, and it feels like it's such an important moment.
I read a thought-provoking Substack the other day that I would like to get both your thoughts on. It's on the Outside as the Substack name, and it basically argues that the one flaw of Adolescence, whilst it being a brilliant program, the one flaw is that it suggests that actually what would have been far more accurate would have been to not have Katie provoke Jamie in any way, because most violence against women and girls is completely unprovoked, and a woman merely existing is enough to goad a man into assaulting her.
Yeah.
So this writer thought it was slightly irresponsible to have that storyline where Katie is accused of bullying him. Of course, we then find out later that she was only kind of bullying him in inverted commas because he humiliated her by sending around nudes. But I'd be interested to know what your kind of take on that is.
I don't consider her, the character, posting certain emojis under. I'm so rubbish at remembering
Jamie.
character names.
Yeah, Jamie.
Yeah.
I don't consider her, Katie, posting emojis under Jamie's Instagram content to be sufficient provocation, as in she wasn't provoking it. So I understand what that writer is saying, but also I don't think every single story has to tell every single angle.
Yeah.
And actually, I think what Adolescence did brilliantly is convey the confusion and alienation that so many teenagers currently feel in our school system. And there is no easy answer to that. And they weren't saying that there was one clear through line as to why the characters acted in the way that they did. And I thought that was part of its power. And actually, I've been interested in some of the commentary because I have 3 stepchildren, and I have 2 of them are older now, but I've got experience of teenage children and like what they go through in this era of social media and cyberbullying and all of that. And I found some of the commentary online really surprising, because there was lots of astonishment that this was going on. Like, what a crisis, what must we do? And I was like, yes, this has been going on for years, and our teenagers are having to cope with it. And I cannot even imagine the stress that so many of them go through just on a day-to-day basis. It's just sort of standard practice.
Without adults understanding anything about that world, which is conveyed so effectively in Adolescence.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And the irony being that a lot of the commentary is like those clueless, not they're clueless, but like those adults and adolescents who just don't quite get it.
Yeah.
Like, what? Mobile phones are not great? What?
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, it's become so normalized to have this kind of terrible interactions between female and male pupils at school that my sister didn't even tell me until like 2 years later that her students were disseminating AI porn of each other. You know, and she just kind of brought that up because we were talking about adolescence. And I was like, oh my God.
That whole digital piece, I mean, I count myself so incredibly lucky to be a Gen X / elder millennial. I'm on the cusp. Gen X sun and millennial moon, whatever. Anyway, because we're the only people who grew up analog but came of age digitally.
Yeah.
So we've got the experience of a childhood where when we left school at the end of the day, we could close the door on the classroom. And what I think is so difficult for teenagers now is not having that boundary. So they are constantly connected with their classmates for good and for bad.
I
Yes.
totally agree. Like, I cannot fathom what it must be like to go home and have like any kind of playground bullying continue in a WhatsApp group.
Horrendous.
Like,
yeah.
Oh my
I'm
god.
Or
so
Snapchat,
grateful to
and,
have
like,
grown up in an
yeah.
era, like, say, that when you went home, it was about your life at home and your family, and of course you were interested in your friends, but it didn't seep into every moment of every day.
Yeah.
How it does now. And I think kids obviously have such kind of social anxiety because they're figuring out where they fit and how to conform and where to be themselves.
Yeah.
That it's just like, yeah, it's horrendous, isn't it? It's a huge kind of
Exactly.
fire waiting to happen.
And it's not just relationships between men and young boys and girls. My most horrific kind of traumatizing memories were definitely from female friends around that age. I don't did you have Bebo? I was thinking about this the other day.
Yeah.
How we would all go home, it was like a social media, it was like MySpace, but you could basically rank your friends, and every night my friends and I would go home and change the ranking of our friends depending on how well that day had gone.
Wow.
So you would go home and check to see if your best friend had like de-ranked you, and it's like your image as well. It's not just your name, it's a picture of you. And I just think, God, girls could be really vicious as well.
And now that's
Definitely.
amplified by like 5,000 because of
Definitely. I mean,
technological
yeah.
advance.
I know for a fact, because it's not just my teenage stepchildren. I also have teenage godchildren and nieces and all that sort of stuff. There are like TikTok groups that exist purely to bully someone, that will be called something like Jamie C is ugly.
Oh, don't.
No, it's
actually
awful.
horrendous.
I know, it's awful. It's like, you know, we're all used to being print journalists and having horrible comments underneath anything that we write. But imagine that when you're sort of 15 and it's about you as a person, when you're just like trying to find your identity and stuff. And that kind of thing, it just breaks my heart. And I don't know what the answer is, but hopefully someone does.
Someone's gonna
Hopefully
do something about
working on
this.
it right now.
Yeah.
And I'm really thrilled that they're showing adolescents in schools, because I also think that what that show did, it maintained its edge. So it's not a cringe show trying to impart a
Educate.
meaningful message. Yeah, it's something that it just feels very heartfelt and rooted in realism, and that's why I loved it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and all those people that say, you know, it wasn't teaching us anything new. Well, I think it was first and foremost trying to be a TV show and entertainment, not an educational tool.
Yes.
I think that was why it was made.
Yeah.
Okay, so on to film. You chose Conclave.
Yes.
The papal drama, which I think you described as very similar to an episode of Traitors.
Oh,
Like
yeah, I
the
love
papal-
that analogy.
Papal version of
The
Traitors.
papal traitors. Traitors in Rome.
It's exactly that. You can
love
see
that.
the recurrent theme of reality TV runs through all of my
Yes.
choices. Conclave. Now, I went to see it in January when I was having a really unusually quiet couple of weeks. I had no podcast recordings in the diary. It was that sleepy time after Christmas and New Year. And my favourite thing to do is to go to the cinema on my own on a weekday afternoon, if I possibly can.
Do you have a favourite cinema?
Well, now I live in Vauxhall, and my favourite cinema is in the Battersea Power Station.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a nice one. Or
Under the Arches.
Either one. I'm not fussy.
lovely.
But I also do love a big old screen, like a sort of multi-screen view.
Yeah.
The Leicester
But it's just
Square
that
Odeon.
yes, it's just that one's the closest one to me now. And I love an everyman. Anyway, don't get me started on that. So I went through this really gorgeous phase of just seeing loads of films that I wanted to catch up on. So I saw Baby Girl. I saw was it We Love in Time? The Andrew
We Live in
Garfield-
Time.
We Live in Time. I saw A Real Pain, and I saw Conclave. And I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did, because I knew that it was about the election of a new pope. And whilst I used to be, fun fact, the religious affairs correspondent of the Sunday Telegraph.
That's so funny.
And I did actually cover a pope's death, John Paul II, and the election of a new pope. And fun fact, I had actually met Joseph Ratzinger, who then became Pope Francis.
Oh my gosh.
So I had this kind of like back catalogue of knowledge about the esoteric methods.
Can we just take a moment to find out how you became religious affairs editor?
You
of the
can, you
Sunday
absolutely can.
Telegraph?
So when I graduated from university, I went straight to the Evening Standard because I'd had a week's work experience there and they'd offered me a job. So I had a year on the Londoner's Diary on the Evening Standard, which was like a highbrow gossip column at that time. And I learned a lot, but it was like a frantic pace. And I was going out every night and sort of bowling up to semi-celebrities going, so give me something newsworthy.
Perfect training for how
It was
to fail.
amazing training. And I realised that the one question that was always guaranteed to be copyworthy was, who do you think the next James Bond is going to be?
Still is.
It's because whatever anyone
Oh God,
says...
at the Telegraph, it is our top question.
Right. Whatever anyone says, it becomes a news story. Anyway, so I had a year of doing that. And then I emailed every single newspaper section editor I could get the contact details of, saying, gives a job. I'd really like to try and be a news reporter. And the Sunday Telegraph got back to me. The news editor there got back to me and said, okay, we'll take you on for a 3-month trial. And so I went there for a 3-month trial and loved it. And it was a really fun time to work there. It was sort of dying days of Fleet Street. So there were still long, boozy lunches on a Tuesday.
Love that.
And then at the end of my trial period, they said, well, we'd like to offer you a job, but the only way we can manage that is if you become religious affairs correspondent, because their religious affairs correspondent had just been promoted, Chris Hastings. Shout out to Chris, he's the most amazing journalist. So I said, okay, fine, knowing nothing really about religion. I did our religious studies GCSE and that was it. I was like, okay. And so I got thrown into the deep end.
That's so random.
So random, but actually like a fascinating beast. It tells you a lot about our society.
Yeah.
It's just, and it happened to come about at a very interesting time. So not only was the Pope dying, but there was a schism in the Church of England over whether they should have gay bishops.
Oh, yes.
And so that was all very interesting. Anyway, so I had this kind of background knowledge of religious affairs when I went to watch Conclave. And part of my question was, how on earth are they going to make this interesting? But have you seen it?
I have. And I was very skeptical because I was raised a
Yes.
Catholic. And so I was like, anything that's going to be vaguely papal, no, I can't do
Yeah.
it. And a listener reached out. I said that on air. And she was like, honestly, I was raised a Catholic. Don't let that put you off. It's amazing. All the set pieces. And
Yes.
so yeah, watched it. Loved the drama. Could totally remove myself from the fact that it was,
About the
somewhat
Catholic
about
Church.
Catholicism.
It's
Yeah.
also so funny.
It's so funny and it's just riveting. The psychodrama is riveting. The acting is A++, like top draw acting. Ralph Fiennes is so good at conveying the tension between what he's feeling and what he's not saying on screen. It's brilliant. It's such a study of how power corrupts even when you don't want it to. It is like the Traitors' Round Table.
Also, the swishing robes really does remind me, unfortunately, of Voldemort, because obviously Ralph
Right,
Fiennes.
yes, that's true. I thought you were going to say Claudia Winkleman
Yeah.
with her kind of
The
amazing
clothes.
skirt. Yeah.
Cool.
But the cinematography is exceptional. There are so many stunning images. And then about 3/4 of the way through, I was like, I'm really enjoying this, but I wonder if it's because I've internalized so much misogyny, because the only female part is Isabella Rossellini, who barely says anything. And I was like, so isn't it interesting that they can get away with this? And it's sort of mostly sort of elderly white men in a room talking. And then there's this incredible twist. And you're like, oh, I was not prepared. And I just loved it. Loved Stanley Tucci in it. I thought it was brilliant. For me, it was prestige cinema. And I think slightly because it's prestige, it's kind of been overlooked with awards because it's, in my mind, it's sort of so good that people have mistakenly thought it's a bit old-fashioned
Or too highbrow or something.
and too high, exactly, and not sort of
Inaccessible.
doing anything new. And there's such an appetite for sort of newness and innovation now.
I mean, as soon as you say papal drama,
Yeah.
you sort of lose 80%.
True.
Did you watch The Young Pope back a few years ago?
Was that
with
the Jude Law one?
I remember when you worked at
Oh,
GQ,
yes.
everyone was getting very excited about The Young Pope because obviously it was a bit of a hot priest moment.
Yes.
In that Jude Law was...
And then it was terrible, I think, wasn't it? Was it terrible? Did it get bad reviews?
I tried to watch it and it lost
yeah.
me, but
Ditto.
maybe. Oh, really?
But then there was another papal one, wasn't there? A good one.
Oh.
The
Well, you're the
the old
expert
pope.
in popes, Elizabeth.
There was another one. Who was it? It was two popes. So it was like there'll be listeners listening
Oh,
to this
was it
being
called
like,
the Two Popes?
was it? It was called the two popes.
This
It
is
was.
really
It was
ringing a
called the two
bell.
popes. I was very tired when I watched it, and I think I might have nodded off, but it was very good.
I've never said Pope so many times
Yeah.
in one day.
Anyway, Conclave, I loved it. And I loved it much more. I'm going to say something that you might consider controversial. So much more than Honora.
Did you?
Yes.
Oh, we loved
Interesting.
Nora.
Yes, I know, but people keep telling me that it was overhyped.
Yes. Do you know what? I also went to the cinema by myself
Yeah.
to see Honora, and I think that's why I really enjoyed it, because I saw it as soon as it had come out. It was buzzy.
Okay.
It had won an award, but it was like the Candor, and it wasn't like widely spoken about.
Yes.
We were like, we just thought, actually, this is perfect for the podcast, so we'll go and cover it. And I just was blown away because I wasn't expecting to love it so much, and other people hadn't been talking about how much they loved it.
That's the issue, isn't it?
Whereas now I
There
can
were too
see
many
that
people.
you'd expect something really spectacular, and then you're like, oh, it's a great film, but not necessarily hugely new.
I just
maybe.
exactly that.
Yeah.
There was too much hype because I literally just watched it 2 weekends ago, and I was so excited about seeing it. And then I was like, I also think I struggle with things that don't nail their tone consistently, and so I didn't really know what I was watching, because on the one hand, it's sort of really dealing with some really serious issues, and it's this portrayal of sex work and money and power and corruption. On the other hand, it's like Pretty Woman meets Home Alone.
Yes.
Like the heist bit, it was sort of so
Yes.
strange.
It's meant to be
Yeah.
different acts. So I think that was Sean Baker's kind of intent, was to have like the first act be the typical rom-com, then it goes into the
Home Alone.
Home Alone
Yeah.
style comedy, slapstick stuff, and then it's
Okay.
meant to be like a tragedy, essentially. I think. Could be wrong with the
Yes.
tragedy.
But I know what you mean, because even in that second chapter, which, as you say, is meant to be slapstick comedy, but it's also really dark because you are watching someone beat up a woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but yet it's meant to
Exactly.
be funny.
Exactly. I wasn't sure, and maybe that's the point. It's provocation, because I wasn't sure whether I was meant to laugh or not. I mean, I
Yeah.
thought Mikey Madison was amazing. I should just say
Yes,
that.
she is incredible.
But I think maybe I would have liked more delineation of each chapter in that case. I would have literally liked something on screen like they did in The Brutalist.
Yeah.
Part 1, Part 2. This is your chapter heading.
Yeah.
I was a bit underwhelmed by The Brutalist, though.
Ditto.
Oh, gosh. Why is nothing good enough?
Yeah.
Apart from Conclave. Actually, I loved Baby Girl as well. I
Oh,
know
we
not everyone
did.
did, but I
Yeah.
loved Baby Girl.
We saw that in the cinema together I think early on a Monday morning.
We did, yeah.
I was
Well,
surprised about how many other people were there
yes,
at the time.
loads of people. But I mean, because we all work in the media, I like something and then I read the discourse and then
Yes.
I kind of intellectualize myself out of liking it.
Yeah.
So Baby Girl, I'm now like embarrassed to have loved it.
No, don't be. And I can tell you why you shouldn't be embarrassed of it. Because I think it was mismarketed as this like steamy, edgy
Yeah.
thriller about the unsayable in sex. And actually, if you listen to an interview with the director, which I have done because I was so obsessed with it, her whole thing was it's a sort of comedy of manners. So it's not saying the unsayable about sex. It's not trying to be kind of revolutionary. It's just this examination of shifting power dynamics between a more powerful older woman and a young man who are like into BDSM. And once she said that, I kind of got it
Yeah.
more.
Yes,
And
that
even
makes more
the
sense.
comparison between Taras Dickinson's character and Antonio Banderas' character, it's kind of
Yes.
about like evolutions in masculinity. in a way.
Totally. I literally got a 2,000 word piece I wrote on my Substack about it that I can send you.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay, amazing.
Be part of the
We'll be
discourse.
chucking that in the show notes for sure. Okay, let's talk about your book. Neither of us have read it, so
Well, I'm excited for you.
Yeah.
So the book that I've chosen is the one that I've literally just read, because even though I am an author and I read lots of books and I remember if I love something, I can never remember any detail.
Oh, same.
After about a month, it just goes.
goes.
Yeah. And part of me is like, is that because of journalism? And so where you're weekly expected to
Yes,
be,
it
a
is.
master of
Consume
what?
so
yes,
much.
yeah.
It must be. Otherwise, there's an issue.
Yes.
With me, certainly.
Well, we share
memory
the same
problem.
issue. So I've just finished it, and it's called Careless People, and there's a subtitle that I can't remember. And it's written by an author called Sarah Wynne Williams. And she is someone who used to work for Facebook, now Meta. And she was obsessed with Facebook. She's a former diplomat. She's from New Zealand. And in the early days of Facebook, she became obsessed with it and how as a company, it could do so much good in the world. And with her background in diplomacy, she pitched a job to Facebook being their head of global policy. She was like, Facebook has to think about how it's going to interact in different countries and with all of these sort of different governmental systems. And you're going to have to discuss like whether you're going to allow politicians to advertise on the site and things like that.
Side note, I love that. Just pitching a job for you
Yes.
to then
And she
employed
pitched it,
in.
I think she pitched it like 3 times because they were like, we don't
Wow.
need someone in charge of global policy. So you're barking up the wrong tree. And she kept going because she was just so insistent. And actually, the book opens with this extraordinary first chapter where she talks about the fact that she ended up at Facebook surrounded by metaphorical sharks. And the first chapter is about her surviving a shark attack as a teenager in New Zealand. And it's an extraordinary piece of writing. And just describes how she almost died. And so she's clearly someone who is very sort of strong and resilient and focused internally. So she gets this job and she sees Facebook through its rise. So she ends up being forced to leave in 2017. That's the year after Facebook essentially won the election for Donald Trump by becoming the main propagator of fake news and accepting money from political lobbyists to disseminate campaign ads. And all the way through, Sarah is questioning the morality of what they are doing and what they're evolving into doing. And you sort of see, actually, it's a bit like Conclave. You see the kind of gradual drip, drip, drip of the corruption of power. And Mark Zuckerberg, who she portrays as this slightly otherworldly nerd who doesn't really have much of a clue about kind of global policy or anything, as Facebook gets bigger and bigger, you see him kind of expand his sense of self and understand like how much power he wields, and suddenly he's like wanting to run for president himself. So it's sort of fascinating character analysis of the people essentially who are in charge but who look away at the things that Facebook is doing wrong or not doing enough to stop. But the bits that I really enjoyed where she's writing about Sheryl Sandberg.
Yeah.
So Sheryl Sandberg famously wrote a book called Lean In, which was all about women leaning into office culture whilst protecting their femininity and their kind of female power.
It's like a manual for having it all.
Exactly. And the dialogue has moved on since then. But what's really funny about Sarah and how she writes about Sheryl Sandberg is that she sort of gently eviscerates everything that Sheryl Sandberg was claiming to embody by just showing how she allegedly behaved. So one example was that Cheryl liked to have a sort of clique of close gal pals at work. And if you didn't do what she wanted to be part of that clique, then you were automatically sort of cold shouldered. And one of the things that allegedly she asked people to do was on her private jet back from Davos to come and get into bed with her.
Oh my God.
And like have a meeting
God.
in bed with her, which Sarah felt really uncomfortable with, unsurprisingly. And Sarah herself, I think, was pregnant at the time and said no. And after that, she was sort of frozen out of Cheryl's inner circle. So there's loads of stuff like that. There's also loads of stuff about Sarah's allegations of really serious sexual harassment that were kind of, she says, ignored by Facebook and ultimately ended up in her being fired. That is quite chilling to read about. And at the same time, I think one of the most chilling things is that it's not entirely surprising. So we're all kind of aware that Facebook isn't doing great things, and yet what are we doing as a world to stop it? Not very much.
Especially pertinent in this moment when they're rolling back diversity and inclusion measures,
Yes.
getting rid of moderators.
Yes.
It's really scary.
Exactly. And she gives this example about Facebook launching in Myanmar, which at the time was subject to a military coup, and various Facebook pages popping up that it turned out Facebook didn't have anyone who could read Burmese, so they couldn't check whether the Facebook page was violating the Facebook code of conduct. And so these pages sprung up, disseminating fake news and using racist slurs, and actually provoked a series of riots that killed people. And there was a delay in taking them down because they couldn't read it, and also a delay in taking them down because some of the people who were working for Facebook in Myanmar supported the rioters. So it's all of this stuff that it's such an eye-opening read.
So it's kind of ethical abominations, but also mass incompetence.
Yes, a combination of that, and then all of this stuff around talking a good game for an outside audience, but not actually doing the internal work to walk the walk. So I thought it was really great, and I really enjoyed her writing.
And it came out in March.
Yeah, and then she was gagged, so then they got out an injunction and prevented her from promoting it.
God.
But it still became a bestseller.
Great.
Ah.
Well,
Yes.
yeah, and we'll continue promoting it.
And it's got a great cover. And I think very often book cover designers don't get their laurels. And I just want to say, I think it's a really good jacket.
Oh, I'm excited to see it now.
So, Elizabeth, talk
Yes.
us through an average day in your life, and a working day, I think.
Yes.
We love finding out the minutiae of people. So please give us like a granular breakdown.
Okay.
Hourly
You do so
breakdown.
much. You
Yes.
write both fiction, non-fiction. You podcast, hosting your own shows. You exec produce all these
Yeah.
other shows. You have Daylight, your own production house. You must have to be so disciplined with your time.
I think I'm extremely lucky that I was born a disciplined person, and I don't struggle with that. And actually, having a lot to do is very good for being disciplined, because I feel overwhelmed if I'm not.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a good motivating force. So I'm sure everyone says this. There's no such thing as an average day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But let me pluck one from the ether that I might have had recently. So I'm a huge believer in sleep. I love sleep. So I'm not someone who gets up at 3:45 a.m. with mouth tape and then has an ice bath and does a workout routine. Absolutely
That's
not.
refreshing.
So I will try and maximize my sleep, get as much as possible. So let's say I wake up at like 7:30 or 8. Then I will have a cup of jasmine tea. Oh, sorry. I'll be woken up by my cat, first of all. Huxley, my ginger
Cat ladies
cat.
here. So
Cat ladies, yeah.
amongst
big fans of
my
Huxley.
people.
Yeah.
Then I make myself a cup of jasmine tea. Then I don't journal and I don't meditate. What I do is watch an episode of reality TV
God, I love
over
that.
breakfast.
Your
Amazing.
therapy.
Bit of Housewives.
Yes.
Yeah.
Favorite breakfast: rye toast, butter, marmite, avocado, cottage cheese, and Maldon sea salt. Delicious.
Ooh, all together.
Yeah, so good.
Really?
Don't knock it until you've tried it. The cottage cheese is exceptional. And that's my own invention.
Cottage cheese, like a real moment.
It's really
Isn't
having
it?
a moment.
And then then I'll watch like a bit of the night before's Below Deck or the Real Housewives of Atlanta. Then I will, if I've got a podcast recording, then I set off to that. If I don't, I'll do some exercise. So I'm a nauseating person who has a Peloton, so I might do a Peloton, or I might go to the gym and do some strength training, which I've got into over the last couple of years and I'm obsessed with. Olivia Atwood and I both. Then
And can I just interrupt to say
Yes.
your podcast prep, therefore, is done way in advance?
yes, so
not on the
podcast prep,
day.
not way in advance, because I like it to be quite fresh. So maybe I will have done it the day before, and I will have spent a few hours researching my guest. And for me, that involves reading every single interview they might ever have given that I can get my hands on, and then coming up with key themes that I'm interested in, but also structuring it around their failures, which I strive to get a week in advance. Doesn't always happen like that. So for anyone who hasn't listened to How to Fail, every guest comes with 3 things that they consider to be failures, and that provides the structure of the conversation. It's quite a nice structure because there's a beginning, middle, and an end. Then I write the introduction to them. So I give each guest an introduction, and actually writing that introduction really clarifies my ideas about what's interesting and what I want to pursue. So that's all part of the research too.
And also, it really puts them at ease. As soon as
Yes.
you read out that
Yeah.
intro, they melt.
Everyone loves
Yeah.
their intros.
Well, that means a lot to me, and it's deliberate for that reason, because I am asking people to open up and be vulnerable, and that's a difficult thing to do if you've only just met someone.
Of course.
And so that intro helps them feel that they're safe, I hope. So I'll have done that at least a day before, but not too far in advance before, because I like to have it fresh in my mind. So then I will get the tube to Old Street, which is where I'm very lucky now to have a beautiful studio, because I used to record from home or from other people's homes. And then I get in sort of half an hour before the recording time starts. I get another cup of jasmine tea on the way, and then maybe record some ads before the guest comes. Then the guest comes, and I have the guest for 1 hour and a half. 1 hour for the main interview, then half an hour where we do listener questions and failures for our subscriber episode. And then after that, I mean, generally on Mondays, I have 2 back-to-back recordings, but let's say on this day I don't. I'll maybe record some more ads, then I'll go home, and then I love working from home. But when I'm writing books, I like to go and write in cafes. So actually, I might go home, drop my stuff off, and then pop out to Gales, which opened up about 2 years ago near where we live, and I could not be more thrilled. So I'll go there, get another green tea. I do drink water as well in between all of this dehydrating green tea.
But no oat milk flat whites for you.
No, I gave up coffee actually when I was going through fertility treatment, and then just never took it back up. Although on holiday, my husband and I like to live on the edge. And if we're on holiday in a hot country, we do allow ourselves a coffee a day. So he gave up as well. Anyway, so then I'll write in Gales for a couple of hours. And actually, my deal to myself is that I'll always write 1,000 words. And it doesn't matter if I think that they're shit, because I can always go back and re-edit them the next time. That's how I write books.
Keep yourself on track.
Yes. Then after that, I'll go back home and I'll probably have a million emails to answer. So I'll do that, because I like to have a sort of zero, what do you call it? Like, I don't leave emails untackled.
yeah.
Same. I need to have a zero. Yes.
Whereas I have like 5,000 missed calls on my phone, because I hate phone calls. Anyway, so I'll do emails, and some of those emails might be about Daylight, my production company. So people pitching ideas, or I might be setting up a new podcast, which is an idea I've developed, a podcast masterclass, which is like a limited series to teach you a life skill. Like how to write a book was the first one I did. How to date I've just done. So I might be trying to find a host for one of those, and trying to work through a structure with a producer as to what the next podcast will be. And what else do I do? Is there anything else?
It's pretty productive already.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And my ideal evening is one where I don't have anything to do, and I can just stay at home, watch Married at First Sight, and eat some random girl dinner that I'm and then my husband will come back, because he actually has a proper job and works in an office, and so he'll probably come back about like 8 p.m, and then I'll have a long bath.
Lovely.
And really, then I'll have a long
Amazing.
sleep again.
God, that sounds amazing.
It's the joy of not having children. As much as I tried and failed, and it will cause me sadness not having children forever, I am very aware of like the privilege of it, that I can sleep and my time is my own.
Yeah, I found it really amazing when you've spoken so openly in interviews about the experience that you had visiting a psychic who gave you a different perspective on living a child-free life, and why maybe that's like completely the right thing for you in this lifetime.
Definitely. That psychic changed my life in the most profound way. And actually, I was so unsure the first time I spoke about it, which was on, sorry to mention another podcast that I'm in your,
No, please.
in your company. It's on Paloma Faith's podcast, Mad, Sad and Bad. And even then I was like, I wondered whether I should talk to her about this, but I love Paloma and she made me feel really safe, and it was in her house, because I understand that it's not for everyone, and that for lots of people it will sound quite weird, but I'm a huge believer that there are certain things that we cannot understand as flawed humans who are bound by human logic. And psychic readings have played a part in that for me, and I've had them in the past. And I was at this very specific juncture in my life where I just had a failed round of egg donation, and that had felt so crushing and devastating. And I'd had 12 years of trying and failing to have a baby, and recurrent miscarriage, unsuccessful IVF, all of it. And I just wasn't sure what to do next. And a very good friend of mine gave me the number of this psychic, and she, the psychic, didn't know anything about me other than my first name, which you don't even have to give, but I decided I'd give my real name. And she is based in America, and she called me up on a Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. And I didn't even ask her a single question. She just said, "Is Elizabeth your real name?" I said, "Yes, it is." And then she said, "Well, you love words." It was the first thing she said. I was like, "I do love words."
Wow.
So the first half of the conversation was her saying incredibly accurate and spot on things about my career and my personal life. And she said, at one point, she's like, "I know you're a writer, but do you do something else? It's like life coaching or something. It's sort of talking people through their mistakes." I was like, "I'm not a life coach, but that makes sense," is what I said to her. And then she said, "I feel like you're grappling to let go of a lifelong desire." And she said, "And I don't know how old you are, and I don't know if it's to do with children, but if it is, I want you to know that I believe you were a mother in a past life of 6, and it almost melted you." That was the word that she used. "And this life has been offered to you, for you, to live on your own terms."
Oh my
Amazing.
gosh.
And it was so extraordinary hearing her say that, because
I've got goosebumps.
I know.
Yes, so
Yeah.
did I actually. Oh my God.
And the number 6, like I'd had 3 unsuccessful fertility rounds and 3 miscarriages. So technically I'd had 6
Wow.
almost children. And her saying that gave me a kind of permission to see how it felt to let it go. And she said, back to your original question, she said, "You're probably worried about your life not having meaning or purpose, but I promise you it will. You're going to live a big life. You're only just getting going. You're going to have great holidays with friends and everything." And she painted this beautiful picture that made me feel hope. And I think I hadn't felt hope for a really long time. And the session ended and I put the phone down. And from that moment, I have been totally at peace with it. And I kept thinking to myself, "I'm in denial. Like it won't last that long. Maybe it's just like a coping mechanism." And it's been 2 years now, over 2 years. And so I'm incredibly grateful to her. I've sent other people to her who are at very specific points in their life, and they have also had similarly transformative experiences.
Gosh, I want to know her name.
I know.
I know. Well, people always ask me, and with all respect to any lovely listener who wants to know, it's something that I'm very protective of because it's so special to me.
Yes.
And I sort of want to. I've never spoken to her again, um, on the phone, although we have texted, and I sort of want to keep it sacred in a way.
That
And
makes
protect
total
her
sense.
as well.
And protect her
From
because
an
otherwise she get. I
onslaught.
know.
Yeah.
She'd get a lot.
3,000 inquiries
Yeah.
in 5 minutes.
But yeah, I'm so grateful to her. And I'm also incredibly grateful to my amazing friends, my husband and my therapist, who also really helped me through.
Well, talking of that very beautiful journey, and you've been so generous with how much you've shared with listeners. And I think that's been, as you know, transformative to other women who have needed
you.
that kind of solidarity. But I wondered how you cope with navigating boundaries, because something I've heard from creators or personalities and podcast hosts in particular, I think because podcasting is such an intimate
Yes.
medium, and people really do think that it really, I guess, fosters parasocial relationships.
Yes.
And I think something we've both heard is these people saying, well, my community are mostly very, very lovely, but there's a kind of small percentage who are quite demanding with what you, inverted commas, owe them.
Feel entitled
Yes.
to your personal life.
Yes.
To news, be that a pregnancy, it
An
seems to be
update on
those
your
two
fertility
things.
journey.
Yeah.
People want to be
Definitely.
kept updated.
Yes. There's also another aspect, which is people who have seen you or believe that they've seen you from the beginning of your journey, then believing not only that they have a claim over you, but that you're not allowed to grow. There's that sense of kind of, "Oh, but I remember when you were little and pathetic, and I want you to stay like that because I felt more comfortable." And it actually is true for a lot of real life friendships as well. And there's a sort of resentment that you don't have time to be one-on-one with them anymore. And I understand, I really do understand that, at the same time as genuinely not being able to give of myself every single minute of every single day, because I would be a weeping mess. I have to say, I have the most incredible community, and there's such an amazing group of listeners and readers who, by and large, are so overwhelmingly kind and understanding and supportive and engaged. And I have so much gratitude to them for what they have given me, which I could never have imagined. And none of it would be possible without them. So actually, I'm so grateful, and I do feel I owe them. And what I feel I owe them is not to share everything, because there's a difference between privacy and secrecy. I'm not being secretive, but there are some things that will always be private. And it's mainly because it involves other people and not just me. But what I do owe them is authenticity. What I do owe them is to show up as myself and to be really open with them about what's happening, when I might have got something wrong, where I'm taking the podcast next, what book I'm writing, because they deserve that. And we have built this together. There is probably, I mean, it's a very, very tiny minority for me where sometimes I feel that um, they think that they're my best friend, but they're not. I've got a best friend who I know and see and speak to a lot. And again, in a way, it's sort of really flattering, because I do always say, if you listen to my podcast or read my books, then you do know me. You really do know me, because I do show up in these spaces. And that's one of the gifts that I've been given, is that in my years as a print journalist, I never felt comfortable showing up as myself in print, because I came of the old school, which was very much like, don't bring yourself into an interview. It's
No
all
I in the story.
no I
Yeah.
in the story. And podcasting made me realize that actually there was more space for it to feel like a conversation rather than just one person talking. So I don't feel like I've really answered your question.
No, I think you have. I think you said it's such a small minority that it's
Yes.
very easy to drown out.
And I've always noticed you being
boundaries,
very
yes.
graceful when you've been asked questions in interview where it's perhaps something you're not quite ready to talk about yet. You just say that, and you'll say,
Yes.
I'm actually working this out myself, and when the
Yes.
time is right, I will share it, but now's not that time.
Exactly that. Sorry, thank you for bringing me back to the
Sorry.
point, the boundaries, yes. And it's also something I say to my guests on How to Fail. Like, if I ask anything that you don't want to answer, please say, and it's completely fine. Yes, a couple of things that I've learned. One is, my actual best friend, who is a therapist, taught me this. She said this thing to me
This
once.
is Emma from
This is
Best,
Emma from
Best Friend
Therapy.
Therapy. Loved that podcast.
Oh, she's amazing. And she said, just because someone throws a ball doesn't mean you have to catch it. So
Love that.
I know, just because someone demands something of me doesn't mean that I have to meet that demand. And it also doesn't mean that I have to respond immediately. So there is nothing wrong with taking some time to work out whether you want to get back to someone. I now have no guilt about not replying to unsolicited DMs. I can't. I won't have any time left over. I do want people to know that I read them and I'm incredibly moved and really appreciate your messages a lot of the time. But I simply can't get back to every single one. And I've also understood the power, as you say, of leaving time for me to understand how I feel about something. So if I've gone through unsuccessful fertility treatment, or egg donation actually is a really good example, because I wasn't sure whether I'd ever speak about that. And I left it a year before I did. And when I did speak about it, it was in a format that I felt really comfortable in. So I wrote a newsletter about it, and I did an episode of Best Friend Therapy about it with Emma. And so that's very much on my own terms. But I'm a big believer in sharing from the scar rather than the wound. So in the past, I think I've probably been too guilty of immediately saying something when I'm feeling in pain, or I'm sort of sorting something through in my own head, and sharing that. And there's absolutely a place for that. And some people do it really magnificently. But I've learned that for me, it carries more power and is more self-protection to wait and to let it kind of percolate. And once I've chosen to share, I will share with total honesty. But there are certain things in my life that are forever ring fenced.
You're so incredible at giving advice.
Oh,
Like, we must know, obviously, we'll talk about the dating podcast in a moment and how to write a book, how to fail. They're quite instructive. They are educational shows. And we wondered really whether you've always been this wise, or whether that's a skill that you've had to hone through podcasting and listening to people. And it's something that's come as a kind of product of your work, or whether it's inherent.
Well, that's an incredibly flattering question. So to accept the premise of it, which I'm not sure that I do, let's accept the premise.
We insist you must.
Okay.
Let's accept the premise.
I definitely think I've got much better at having what I hope is a compassionate point of view and response since doing the podcast, but also since being in therapy myself. So I first went into therapy age 27 when I did the obligatory 12-week CBT that sort of every person who has the means gets to do in their late 20s. But then I went back into it when I was going through IVF for the first time, and then when I was going through a divorce, and that really helped me. And then I had some time off again, and then I went back in it for various reasons and fertility treatment. And now I have an amazing therapist who I see every fortnight. And also being best friends with a therapist, I'm surrounded by people who understand the power of naming emotion and really understanding where your feeling might be coming from. And I'm also married to a very enlightened person who's had his own spells in therapy and he's just interested in the world, and he's a great communicator because of stuff that he's been through. And so being surrounded by those kind of people really helps as well. So I think it's been a learning process. And I also think that having lived longer and lived through experiences makes you wiser. And that's why I always am passionate about saying that women have been sold this myth that age diminishes us. But actually, my experience has been totally the opposite, that I feel more empowered and powerful at 46 than I ever had before, and much more myself, actually. And that's partly because I've seen some shit.
Yeah.
And also because I know that I've survived it. And so there's a great deal of strength that comes from that. So I think it's a combination of all of those things.
And going back to your best friend, Emma,
Yes.
and the theme of friendship, of course, you've written Friendaholic.
Yes.
Better on Therapy was your hit podcast.
Oh.
I wondered if you had been as aware as we have of how much female friendship has become the kind of talking point in certain media circles, particularly The Cut, where, you know, these kind of first-person pieces, often by inverted commas, a wronged friend, go viral. I'm thinking specifically of a couple of years ago, The Cut's Can Our Friendship Survive Your Baby?
That was a big cover story.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's kind of variations on that theme constantly.
What was the
every
one
6 months? There was
2
one we
weeks
talked
ago?
about on air. A woman who felt resentful of her friends who are new parents not being interested in her life anymore.
Yes, I remember that one.
And we feel instinctively that some of these stories, obviously they're designed to get clicks, but they're very divisive. And actually, anecdotally in our own lives, the resentment that they talk about, of course it can be real, but I think it's being amplified by the media to a degree, particularly this idea that women don't respect each other's life choices, that they feel resentful. Of course, there is such an undercurrent of jealousy in female friendships. You and Olivia Atwood talk about this in your How to Fail episode. That's a kind of societal push. Women are encouraged to see each other almost as competition.
As Amanda Knox said in this episode that she was on How to Cope with John Robbins this week, she says male fantasy is that all women secretly hate each other.
Yes.
But we're quite resistant to this idea that all women are at loggerheads.
Yeah, and you absolutely should be. And I think it's one of those things. When I wrote Friendaholic, that came out 2 years ago. And part of the reason I wanted to write it is because I felt that not enough was spoken about friendship, about platonic love, and how for me it's been the most consistent love of my life. But there isn't a specific vocabulary or language around it. And that means that we get into sort of murky territory when we might evolve out of friendship. So we need to end a friendship and we're not quite sure how to do it. Whereas we know how to do that in romantic love because there's so much culture around that concept. And it does feel like, having written that book, there is so much more cultural conversation. I'm not saying that I triggered it, of course, but it feels like it's a conversation that's overdue. And in the vacuum, it's now become this hot topic where, because there's been such a lack of examination in the past, now there's almost over-examination of it.
Yeah.
And that's why you get these sort of divisive, potentially clickbaity articles. But I'm still glad that the conversation is being had. So friendship and fertility, I hadn't actually read anything about that until I wrote the chapter that I wanted to write in Friendaholic, which was how to survive in friendships when you're not having a baby and everyone else seems to be having one. It was a snappier title than that. And I'm really glad that there are more conversations around that now, because it can feel incredibly isolating. And when people feel isolated or alienated, that's when friendships break up, but it's also when culture and society unravels. And I think, I mean, not to make too big a leap, but we're seeing that in America right now. The divisiveness between people who do not understand each other. And actually, that's why conversations are so powerful. And honesty about how we feel is a radical act. So even though we're going through a divisive clickbaity phase, I'm grateful that the conversation has been opened up. But my experience of female friendship is absolutely, predominantly, it's unbelievably supportive and incredible. And there's a shorthand that I have with my closest female friends, which means we don't have to see each other all of the time. And very frequently we can't, but we can send each other 10-minute voice notes. That's me. Um, uh, and when we do eventually see each other, we can hit relational depth very, very quickly because we feel so sort of close and in each other's corners. And for me, the most important metric of friendship is generosity of spirit. That idea that you are always, your default is to think the best of your friend. Your default is to cheer them on. And that's so important to me. And it's way more important than a regular phone call or a shared hobby. It's that sense that we will do battle for each other. and there's an acceptance. I think that's it. There's like a no judgment, a space of acceptance with the closest female friendships that is very rare to get anywhere else.
And genuinely wanting the best for each other
Yeah.
rather than almost wanting someone else to fail because it will make you feel better about yourself.
Yes, exactly. There are very few joys comparable to seeing someone you love succeed in a way that fulfills them and in a way that enables them to see themselves as they should be seen. Because for so much of our experience as women, we are told in insidious ways to hate ourselves, and we internalize so much of that shame and that cultural baggage. So to see my friends come into their own and get success on their own terms and be seen and loved and accepted for who they are rather than who they've been told they should be or who they've been trying to pretend to be is such a beautiful thing, and I'm all for it.
And have you found, I mean, maybe this is slightly intrusive a question, but have you found that your friendships have remained quite consistent throughout your 30s and 40s? Or have you noticed, as I've heard other people in their 40s say, that actually maybe once people who have had children, their children grow up a little bit, you actually get a bit closer?
Yes, that's
and
yeah.
I think one of my old friends described it as female friendship in kind of what's the word?
Stages?
Yeah, what's it in play? No, acts.
Acts,
Oh,
yeah.
acts,
Yeah, 3 acts.
Oh, back to back.
Like adolescence, yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, no, an aura.
Yeah.
Yes, and I'm a big believer that friendships have seasons, and there will be some that will be lifelong and how wonderful, and there are some that won't be, but that doesn't make them a failure simply because we've evolved into a different phase of our lives. And yes, my friendships have changed. Many of them have really deepened in a way that I value precisely because children have got that bit older. So some of my friends are kind of more available. And also, I really love being around my friends' children because it's just a really fun thing to see these sort of mini humans develop under the influence of someone you love so much, and then to be able to get to have conversations with them when they start talking and all that sort of stuff, and then seeing them as teenagers is kind of great. And then I also have had many kind of new friends come into my life of very different ages, and I'm a huge believer in having friends from different age groups, and I really value that. So Trini Woodall won't mind me speaking about this because we chatted about it the other day on her podcast. She's a friend who I made through the podcast, and we've become so close. And she, although you wouldn't know it, is a bit older than I am, and like I'm her young friend, and she's my kind of guru, mentor, business sounding board. And she's become like a sister to me, and I'm so grateful I have that. And then I have sort of younger friends through podcasting or journalism who I like. There's just so much energy and kind of freshness that I get from them. So I'm a really big believer in all of that too, and just carrying on making friendships.
I love that.
Okay, let's talk about romantic relationships.
Let's do it.
So you and Mel both met your husbands at 39
Yes.
on dating apps. And that was
Yes.
partly why you guys decided to start How to Date when you
Yes.
realised you'd had this shared experience. Our listeners in general are feeling particularly despondent about the apps at the moment, about trying to navigate dating online. And we wondered whether you had any advice for those people.
Yes, it's actually advice that Mel is so brilliant at imparting on the How to Date podcast. And honestly, it's been a joy. It's been like a masterclass for me. I'm like, tell me more, Mel. Just tell me how to live. And she talks about the importance of dating yourself first. And it's something that I definitely didn't do and probably should have done. And what we mean by dating yourself first is really, for many of us, we find ourselves pitched into single life and dating apps off the back of heartbreak or a long-term relationship going awry. And my experience was I'd been in a series of long-term monogamous relationships culminating in a failed marriage from the age of 19 to 36. And that's when I started dating. And I was so panicked that I just pitched myself into the apps. I was like, I need to find someone immediately. And I didn't really get to know who I was outside of the parameters of a relationship. I didn't get to like myself. And so even if it's something as simple as identifying the 3 things that you love doing, just you, whether it's going to the cinema in the middle of the day, whether it's going for a walk, whether it's eating cheese, like spend some time dating yourself.
Whereas you say on the podcast, knowing what restaurant you'd want to go to without catering for the other person.
Exactly. Because I was such an inveterate people pleaser. I remember this so vividly. Like an ex-boyfriend of mine who was perfectly nice saying, where do you want to go for lunch? I was like, I don't know. Where do you want to go? And I genuinely didn't know. I was not in touch with my own desires at all. And that's my key piece of advice, because once you get to know yourself and value yourself and build up that esteem that you need, rejection is, I'm not going to say it's easy to handle, but it's definitely easier to handle than if you're hanging your entire sense of self on the success or otherwise of a date. And rejection, sadly, is part of the game. But rejection, I firmly believe, is either redirection towards the person or the love that is worthy of you, or protection from the person or the love that was going to damage you. So if you remind yourself of that any time that you feel rejection, or someone doesn't get back to your WhatsApp, or this date that you thought went really well resulted in the person saying, actually, I didn't feel any chemistry, just say thank you to that rejection, because it is doing something for you. And all failure, I believe, is data acquisition. So a failed date
Very good point.
will teach you something about what you want from the next person. And it might just teach you that you don't want to date and you want to spend some time on your own and being single and dating yourself. But all failure can teach you something. So no failed date is worthless. And at the very least, I promise you that in the fullness of time, it will make a good anecdote.
And very quickly to finish, you say in one of your 10 dating commandments that no judgment is crucial, which of course I agree with. But one thing that I do think is holding a lot of women back, me included, is the ick, and inverted commas, the normalization of the ick. And actually our mutual friend Ed Cummings said to me, he was like, you are really stimming yourself in dating because you are compiling this list of icks every time you meet someone, kind of as a joke or to tell girlfriends, as you say, because it's a funny story. But it really is stopping you from just being open to people, and it is holding women back.
Yes, that's actually one of my top tips. So Mel's top tip is dating yourself first, and you're totally right. My top tip is to be open-minded. And it's different from open-hearted, because I think you should protect your heart. But I think you need to completely rip up the checklist. You can still use it as a sort of joke with your female friends. I totally get that. But when I met Justin, who is now my husband, and I met him on Hinge, and I was at a very low point with all of the apps, I sort of swore myself off them. I deleted them from my phone. And then someone recommended Hinge, which at that time was quite a new app. And he was one of the first people that I matched with, and the only person from Hinge that I went on a date with. His profile was not great. It wasn't. It wouldn't have met many of my requirements. He had 3 kids. Three. I'd been married before and had 2 stepkids that time round. I was like, no, I'm done with that. 3. And it didn't seem that he had much of a sense of humour.
Oh God, did you have really earnest prompts?
It was quite earnest. It was like, so now looking back, I'm like, oh, that's so sweet and pure. Like he's just because he's such a pure, he's such an authentic, honest person. And the photos were not the best. He's a very handsome man, but he's not vain. So he hadn't put the best photos up of himself. And he'll laugh if he ever hears this. He described himself as a Zenist.
Interesting.
Like a Buddhist.
Yeah.
I was like, okay.
In a non-ironic way.
Not just a Buddhist, a Zenist, a specific type of Buddhist. I was like, okay, this
Right.
is a mishmash right here.
So what caught your eye then?
So what had happened was I was so downbeat about everything and not meeting anyone that I'd changed my parameters on the app and I'd increased my age range. And not by much, because Justin's only 4 years older than I am. But if I hadn't increased my age range, he wouldn't have come up. And what actually translated into a date was his consistency. So he messaged me every single day from matching on Hinge. He messaged every single day, just being like, "How is your day? I'm in South Africa." To the extent that I was like, this is so weird, because I was so
Were you
used
Like,
replying?
why are you contacting me
I was
so much?
replying, but in a really like cool way. I was like, who is this guy? Because I was so used to emotional fuckwittage, an inconsistency of communication and mistaking that for passion. And suddenly there was this man who was just there every day, who I'd never met. He read one of my novels before we met. I was like, creepy. And then it was only in the gap of 2
Supportive
weeks.
of your work.
And eventually he went, "I'm traveling a lot for work over the next 2 weeks. I'd really like to meet. These are your options. We could meet for lunch, which is high risk because you might hate me and have to put up with me for an entire meal, but you get a free meal. Or we could meet for a coffee, which is lower risk. Or we could have cocktails one evening."
At the Mondrian.
At the Mondrian. And so I obviously went for the cocktails, and I was very specific, and I was like, I can do from 5 to 7 p.m. because I was like, nothing's going to happen. It's
Slot
going to be a
him
really
in.
disappointing date, so I'm just going to leave. And I had such low expectations that the morning I met him, I booked flights to move to LA full time.
Oh my God.
I was like, I'll just get this
Wow.
date out of the way, and then I'm going to gear up for my new fabulous life in LA. And I walked into the bar at the Mondrian, and my life changed.
And you knew from the moment you met him.
I didn't know from the moment. I knew that there was chemistry from the moment I met him, and I was like, it was palpable, and he was amazing and asked me questions which not many. Well, at that stage, not many of my first dates did. I was the one who was making all the conversation. And so there was immediate chemistry. But I think when you've been a bit bruised and battered by love, and it's a second marriage for both of us, so we've both been married before, you're cautious about thinking this is the one. And so it took a good 6 months for us to like understand that we were going to commit to saying I love you. Like it took 6 months. And again, that's something else that I would say. For me, falling in love with Justin was a slow burn in the most romantic way, because there is a safety to that love that I've never experienced anywhere else. And I was so used to love being sort of fireworks and narcissism and like love bombing and all that sort of stuff, that I almost had to be disindoctrinated from that. And Justin was just consistent and kind and also like great and funny and romantic and passionate and all of those things. But it was really like we decided to build it slowly together, and I'm very grateful for that. So that's the other thing that I would say.
Elizabeth, what a beautiful way to
Oh,
end.
thank
That's
you
given
so
me
much.
hope. And yeah, that's
Yay.
really uplifting. So thank you.
You're incredibly eligible and gorgeous, so
Thank
I
you.
could set you up with 1 million people right now.
Please do.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Thank you for
We've loved
having
having you on. It's
me.
been amazing.
Oh, I've loved it.